Let me tell you about my Uncle Danny, because he's the reason I understand this reading in my bones. Danny was a bricklayer. Big hands, quiet man, the kind of person who'd fix your car in the rain and refuse to talk about it afterward. And he was in love with a woman named Colette, for I am not exaggerating, 11 years before he ever said a word about it. 11 years. They were friends. They saw each other constantly. Everyone in the family knew. Colette probably knew. And Danny said nothing, did nothing, held it all in, year after year. Because, and this is the part that matters, he had decided, somewhere deep down, that a man like him didn't get to want a woman like her out loud. He'd built a whole story about why he had to hold back, and he was going to take that story to his grave. And then Danny's father died. And at the funeral, standing in a suit that didn't fit right, watching them lower his old man into the ground, something in Danny just broke open. And afterward, in the parking lot, he walked straight up to Colette and said 11 years of nothing in about 4 sentences. Just said it, right there by the cars. I asked him once. Years later, they were married by then. What changed? Why that day? And he said something I've never forgotten. He said, watching them bury my father, I understood for the first time that holding back isn't safe. I thought holding back was the safe option. And I stood there and realized it was the most dangerous thing I'd ever done. Because you can hold back so long that you run out of time to ever stop. And that, my loves, is this reading. Almost exactly. Because there is a masculine connected to you who has been holding back in a major way. The title's right about that. And something specific just happened that cracked the whole thing open. Same as Danny. Something occurred that made the holding back suddenly feel more dangerous than the risk he'd been avoiding. And I'm going to tell you what he was holding back, why he held it back so long, and the very specific thing that just changed it. And I want to tell you why Danny's story matters so much for how you hear this one, because it corrects a mistake almost everyone makes about people who hold back. When we're on the receiving end of someone's restraint, we tend to assume the restraint means the feeling is small. We think, if he really felt something, he'd show it. So the fact that he's not showing it must mean there's not much there. That is exactly backwards, and Danny is the proof. 11 years of silence was not 11 years of not caring. It was 11 years of caring so much that saying it out loud felt impossible. The silence wasn't the absence of the feeling. The silence was the size of it. And I need you to carry that correction into every card that follows, because it changes the meaning of everything you're about to hear. Hey, it's Elena. Welcome to Elena Tarot. This is a good one, a real one, so settle in. Let me shuffle. The first card, the wall he built first card. And it shows me the holding back itself, the shape of it, the size of it. The card is the 4 of Pentacles. Now, I've read this card before as a wall around the heart, but that's not quite what I'm seeing here. So let me be precise, because precision is the whole point of this reading. The 4 of Pentacles here isn't a man guarding his heart from you. It's a man guarding something he's afraid to let himself even feel, let alone show. He's clutching, white-knuckling. And what he's holding so tightly isn't distance, it's restraint. He has been holding himself back from you the way you'd hold your breath underwater, deliberately, with effort, and at a cost that builds the longer it goes on. Here's what that actually looks like. And I want you to check it against your own experience of him. It looks like a man who is clearly there present, attentive, showing up, but who never quite says the thing. Who gives you 80% and locks the last 20% in a vault. Who you can feel caring about you, but who won't declare it. Who runs hot and then suddenly pulls the reins on himself right when it's about to become real. That's the 4 of Pentacles holding back. It's not absence. Absence would be easier to read. It's presence with the brakes on. And I think that's exactly what's confused you about him, because you could feel the engine running, but you kept watching him refuse to take his foot off the brake. Let me give you a practical picture so it's concrete. You know how some people, when they're given a compliment, physically can't just say thank you, they deflect. They joke, they change the subject. Because receiving the good thing makes them too vulnerable. Now imagine that reflex, but aimed at an entire feeling. That's him. Every time the feeling for you swelled up and got close to the surface, some old reflex kicked in and shoved it back down, deflected, changed the subject, put the brakes on. Not because the feeling was small, because it was big. And big is exactly what he didn't trust himself to hold. Comment breaks on if you felt this exact thing, a man who was obviously there, but who kept stopping himself right at the edge of real. Because that's the wall we're about to take apart. And I want to add one thing about the cost of this kind of holding back, because I don't think you fully considered his side of it. You experienced his restraint as frustrating as him withholding something from you. And it was. But here's what you might not have clocked. Holding back like this is exhausting for the person doing it. It is genuinely tiring to spend that much energy, every single interaction, managing yourself, monitoring yourself, catching the feeling before it shows, and stuffing it back down. Think about how draining it is to hold a plank for even 2 minutes. Now imagine holding an emotional plank for months. That's what he's been doing around you. Smiling while bracing, being warm while clamping down, enjoying you while simultaneously fighting a constant low-grade war against his own face and his own words. So when I say he was holding back in a major way, understand it wasn't passive. It was labor. He was working hard to keep that 20% locked up, and the fact that he kept doing it, kept showing up to do it, rather than just walking away from the whole thing, tells you he was never indifferent. Indifferent men don't exert themselves. He was exerting himself constantly. That effort was, in its own strange way, a form of caring he couldn't admit to. Next card. The second card, why he held back okay. Second card, and this is the why, the actual reason underneath all that restraint. Because it's never random. The card is the Nine of Swords. The Nine of Swords is the card of the 3M mind. It's a person sitting up in the dark, head in their hands, tormented by thoughts that feel enormous at night and that no one else can see. It is private suffering, anxiety, dread, the catastrophes we rehearse in our own heads that never happen but that feel completely real while we're rehearsing them. And here's what it tells me about why he held back. He talked himself out of you, over and over, in the dark, alone. This wasn't a man who didn't feel enough. This was a man who felt so much that it scared him, and then took that fear into the 3M room in his head and let it convince him of 100 reasons he shouldn't act. She doesn't feel the same. I'll ruin the friendship. I'm not enough for her. I'll say it wrong. She'll leave. Better to keep what we have than risk losing it by wanting more. Round and round, night after night. The Nine of Swords is the engine of his holding back. And the engine was fear dressed up as reasoning. And I want to name something important, because it's the key to the whole card. The thoughts that kept him from you felt like wisdom. That's the trap of the Nine of Swords. At 3M, don't risk it. You'll only get hurt doesn't feel like fear, it feels like the smart, mature, protective conclusion. He wasn't sitting there thinking I'm being a coward. He was sitting there thinking I'm being sensible. That's how holding back survives for so long. It disguises itself as good judgment. Danny thought he was being realistic for 11 years. He wasn't being realistic. He was being afraid and calling it realism. Here's the practical version, and everyone's done this. Think of a text you were too scared to send, and how your brain generated an entire courtroom of reasons not to send it, all of which felt airtight at the time. It's too late. They're probably busy. I'll seem needy. And then think about how, in the clear light of the next morning, every single one of those reasons looked flimsy and obviously fear-based. That's the Nine of Swords. The reasons feel like iron at night and turn to paper in daylight. He's been living in that nighttime logic about you for a long time, mistaking his fear for foresight, and it kept the wall standing. And there's a cruel loop inside the Nine of Swords that I want to name, because it explains why it went on so long. The longer he held back, the more he had invested in the holding back being the right call, and so the more his mind worked to justify it. Because if he'd admitted in month 6 that he should just say something, then he'd also have to admit that months 1 through 5 were wasted. Cowardly, a mistake. And the mind hates admitting that. So instead, it doubles down, it generates more reasons, better reasons, to protect the decision it already made. This is a real thing people do. We defend our past choices, not because they were right, but because they were ours. And admitting they were wrong feels like a second injury on top of the first. So his Thram mind wasn't just scared. It was scared and committed to proving the fear was wisdom, because the alternative was facing how much time he'd already lost to it. That loop can run for years. It ran for 11 with my Uncle Danny. It takes something huge to break it, which is exactly what the next card is about. Next card. The third card, the specific thing that happened okay. Third card. And this is the one you clicked on for. The very specific thing the title promises. The card is the death card, and don't panic, because in a reading like this, it's almost the best card you could get. And I'll show you exactly why. Death is never about literal death. Death is the card of an ending that forces a transformation. It's the moment when something is so definitively over that the person can no longer live the way they were living. It's the card of no going back. And it's appearing right here as the specific event that changed everything, tells me something very particular about what happened to him. Something in his life ended. And the ending was significant enough that it broke the spell of the holding back. Now the exact form of it can vary. And I want to be honest about that rather than pretend I can see the literal event. But the energy is unmistakable. Something closed a chapter for him. It might have been a loss, like Danny's father, a death, a grief, a funeral that reminded him life is finite. It might have been the end of another relationship or situationship that he was half hiding inside of. It might have been a job ending, a move, a friendship dissolving, a version of his life falling away. It might have been something ending for you that he witnessed. But whatever the specific event, it functioned as a death card, it ended something. And the ending shook him so hard that the wall he'd built, the Four of Pentacles restraint, the Nine of Swords reasoning, suddenly couldn't hold. Because here's what an ending does. And this is the mechanism the whole reading turns on. An ending destroys the illusion of infinite time. The entire holding back strategy secretly depended on the belief that there would always be more time to work up the courage, time to get ready, time to become worthy, time to eventually maybe say something. And a death event detonates that belief. It says, time is not infinite. Chapters close. People and moments end. You do not get forever to hold back. And a man staring at that truth cannot go back to comfortably white-knuckling his feelings. Because the thing that made the white-knuckling feel safe, the assumption of endless time, is gone. Let me make this concrete, because you've seen it. You know how a health scare makes people suddenly quit the job, book the trip, mend the fight, say the thing? You know how a funeral makes strangers hug and estranged siblings call each other? That's not coincidence. It's the death card operating in real life. Endings strip away the later. They collapse the comfortable distance between someday and now. And when later disappears, all the things a person was saving for later come flooding to the surface with terrifying urgency. That's what happened to him. His later died. And you were the biggest thing he'd been saving for it. Comment his later died if you can feel this, if you sense that something ended in this person's world and it lit a fire under everything he'd been putting off. And I want to add a subtler layer to the death card, because it's not always a dramatic external event. Sometimes the thing that ends is internal. And that version is worth naming because it might fit better. Sometimes what dies isn't a person, or a job, or a relationship. Sometimes what dies is a version of himself, an identity he'd been clinging to that finally became unlivable. Maybe he'd been telling himself for years that he was fine on his own, that he didn't need anyone, that the solitary life suited him, and then one ordinary day that story just died, collapsed under its own weight. He looked at it and couldn't believe it anymore. Or maybe the version of him that dies is the one who thought he had to be ready, fully healed, fully successful, fully worthy before he could deserve you. And something finally killed that idea too. And he realized he was never going to feel ready. That ready was a mirage, that he'd hold back forever, waiting for a readiness that was never coming. Either way, the death card is a funeral for a self that can't continue. And that's often more powerful than any external event. Because when a version of you dies, there's genuinely no going back to it. You can't unsee through an illusion once it's shattered. So whether it was an external ending or the quiet death of an old story he told about himself, the result is the same. The man who held back is, in a real sense, gone. And a different man is standing in his place. And the different man cannot do what the old one did. Next card. The fourth card, what he'd actually been holding back, okay? Fourth card. And now we get to the content, the specific thing that was behind the wall this whole time. The card is the Knight of Cups. The Knight of Cups is the romantic of the entire deck. He's the one who arrives with his heart in his hands. The lover. The one moved by deep feeling to offer it. And it's showing up here as the thing that was being held back, tells me exactly what was locked in that Four of Pentacles vault. It was devotion. Not attraction devotion. This is the card of a man who doesn't just want you, but who wants to give to you, to pursue you, to be romantic and tender and all in. And that is a very specific and very vulnerable thing to have been holding back, because attraction is easy to admit and devotion is terrifying to admit. Attraction says, I want you. Devotion says, I would build my life around you. And that second sentence is the one that can get a man truly destroyed if it's not received. So, of course, he held it back. Of course. The bigger the thing behind the wall, the higher you build the wall. And here's what I want you to really understand, because it reframes every frustrating moment you had with him. The strength of his holding back was a measure of the strength of what he was holding. People don't white-knuckle small feelings. You don't build a Four of Pentacles fortress around a passing crush. The very intensity of his restraint, the thing that frustrated you, that made him seem closed and withholding, was itself the evidence of how much was behind it. He wasn't holding back because he felt little. He was holding back precisely because he felt so much that letting it out felt like it could end him. Let me give you the practical picture. Think about the difference between how you talk about a movie you kind of liked versus a dream you're afraid to say out loud. The movie, you'll chat about easily. The dream, the real one. The one that would devastate you if someone laughed at it, you guard that. You keep it close. You only show it to people you deeply trust, and even then your voice shakes a little. That's the difference between ordinary feeling and the Knight of Cups devotion he was hiding. You were the dream he was afraid to say out loud, and he guarded you like one. And here's a way to test this that will make it undeniable to you. Look back at the pattern of his holding back, rather than any single moment. Because a man who's merely lukewarm doesn't have a pattern, he just drifts. But a man holding back Knight of Cups devotion has a very specific signature. He gets close, then retreats. Gets close, then retreats. He'd have a moment with you where the realness almost broke through a conversation that went deeper than usual. A look that lasted a beat too long. A night where the wall thinned, and then, predictably, he'd pull back, go quiet, get distant. Maybe even act a little cold right afterward. And you probably took that retreat personally, like you'd done something wrong. You hadn't. The retreat was the tell. People don't retreat from feelings that are small. They retreat from feelings that scared them by getting too close to the surface. So every time he pulled back, right after a moment of realness, he was actually confirming the size of what he was holding. The push-pull wasn't mixed signals. It was one very consistent signal. This matters too much. Abort, abort. Look at the pattern and you'll see the devotion hiding inside it. Plain as day. Next card. The fifth card, the fear that kept the wall standing so long, okay? Fifth card. And this digs into the deepest root, the specific fear that made him hold back for as long as he did. Because the Nine of Swords told us he was afraid, this card tells us what the fear was made of. The card is the Five of Cups. The Five of Cups is the card of a person standing over spilled cups, grieving what was lost, so focused on the spill that they can't see the cups still standing behind them. It is the card of past loss coloring present possibility, of old grief becoming a lens through which everything new gets viewed with dread. And here's what it reveals. He held back from you because somewhere in his past, opening up cost him badly. This is a man who at some point gave his heart, really gave it. Knight of Cups style, and it went wrong. Got broken, rejected, betrayed, humiliated, abandoned, some version of that. And that old spilled cup became the whole reason he kept his cups locked up around you. The Five of Cups is the ghost that whispered every time he got close to opening up to you, "Remember what happened last time? Remember how much that hurt? Don't do that again." His holding back wasn't really about you at all. It was about protecting himself from a repeat of a wound he'd already survived once and wasn't sure he'd survive twice. And this is important for how you understand him and how you don't take the holding back personally. You were being kept at a distance by a fear that predated you. You were paying the price for something someone else did to him long before you arrived. Which isn't fair to you. I'm not saying it's fair, but it's the truth. And the truth is that his wall was built out of old bricks, not anything you did or didn't do. He looked at you, felt the enormous Knight of Cups pull, and got terrified, because the last time he felt something like that, it destroyed him. Here's the practical version, and it's one of the most human things there is. Think about how a person who got badly bitten by a dog as a child flinches at every dog for the rest of their life, even the gentle ones, even the ones wagging their tails, even the ones who'd never hurt a soul. The flinch has nothing to do with the dog in front of them. It's an old wound firing in a new moment. That's how he's been with you. You've been the gentle dog getting flinched at because of a bite you never gave. And it took a death card-sized event to finally make the fear of the old bite smaller than the fear of missing out on you. Comment old bricks if this makes something click, if you're realizing his wall was built long before you ever showed up. And I want to give you a reframe here that I think will genuinely help you, whatever you decide to do with this person, because it's about not personalizing other people's fear. One of the most freeing things you can ever learn is that when someone keeps you at a distance, it very often has nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with their history. We are all walking around carrying wounds that predate the people we meet, and we all, to some degree, make new people pay for old injuries. It's not fair, and it's not right, but it's deeply human. So when this man held you at arm's length, and you lay awake wondering what's wrong with me, why won't he let me in? Am I not enough? You were asking the wrong question the whole time. The answer was never in you. It was in a chapter of his life that closed before you ever appeared. You were reading his fear as a verdict on you, when it was actually a scar from someone else. And I gently suggest, notice how often you do that in general. Notice how quickly you assume that someone's distance means you're lacking, when so often it means they're scared. And their fear was authored long before your name was in the story. That habit of taking other people's walls personally, that's worth putting down, not just with him, but everywhere. Next card. The sixth card, what changes now? Practically okay. Sixth card. And this is the practical turn now that the specific event cracked the wall. What actually changes in his behavior? The card is the Eight of Wands. The Eight of Wands is movement. Fast, direct, unobstructed movement, 8 wands, flying through the air toward their target with nothing in the way. It's the card of things that were stuck, suddenly becoming unstuck, of momentum, of messages and moves happening quickly after a long delay. And after all those static, heavy, held back cards, the Four of Pentacles clutching, The Nine of Swords stewing the Eight of Wands is a rush of air. It's the dam breaking. So here's what changes. The holding back stops, and it stops fast. Once a wall like his comes down, it doesn't come down slowly. It comes down all at once, because it was holding back so much pressure. The Eight of Wands tells me that after the specific event, this person moves from restraint to action, probably with a speed that's a little startling given how slow he was before. Suddenly, there's contact, or directness, or an honesty from him that wasn't there. Things that were frozen for a long time start happening quickly. The man who couldn't say the thing for months or years suddenly can't stop the thing from coming out. And I want to prepare you for that whiplash, because it's real. You spent so long with the braked, withholding version of him that the sudden Eight of Wands version can be disorienting, even hard to trust. You might think, where is this coming from? Why now? Why so fast? And the answer is everything this reading has shown you. It's coming from the dam finally breaking. It's fast because it was held so long. All that restrained pressure has to go somewhere. And when the wall cracks, it all moves at once. Here's the practical read, and it's useful. When something that's been stuck for a very long time suddenly breaks loose. The initial rush is always more intense than the eventual steady state. Think of how water blasts out of a hose the second you unkink it, then settles to a normal flow. So the first wave of his opening up may be intense, fast, even overwhelming. That's the unkinking. What you want to watch for is whether it settles into a steady flow or whether it was just a burst that sprays everywhere and then trickles out. The Eight of Wands guarantees the burst. It's the weeks after the burst that tell you whether the change is real. Intense beginnings are common. Consistent follow-through is the rare thing, and it's the only thing that counts. And I want to give you one specific thing to watch during the burst, because it's easy to get swept up and miss it. Notice whether his rush of opening up is directed at you as a person or just aimed at his own relief. There's a real difference. A man who's genuinely opening to you will, even in his excitement, keep checking in on you, asking how you're receiving all this, giving you room to respond, noticing whether he's overwhelming you, treating your reaction as something that matters. A man who's just discharging his own pent-up pressure will talk at you, flood you with his revelations, his feelings, his story, his relief, without much awareness of whether you're okay in the middle of the deluge. The first is opening up with you. The second is using you as the wall he finally gets to spill against. Both feel intense. Only one of them actually includes you. So during the burst, when it's easy to be dazzled by the sheer force of a man finally letting go, keep one small part of yourself watching. Is he pouring this out to me or just near me? That single distinction will tell you an enormous amount about what kind of thing you're actually being offered. Comment the dam broke if you've already started feeling this shift, the sudden unstuck movement from someone who was frozen for so long. Next card. The seventh card, what he needs to actually say to you, okay. Seventh card. And this one is specific and tender. It's about the actual message trying to come through. The thing he needs to say now that he can finally say things. The card is the Judgment card. Judgment is the card of reckoning and, importantly, of confession of a person finally answering a call they've been ignoring, standing up, and speaking a truth they've been sitting on. And its presence here tells me the thing he needs to say isn't just "I like you." It's bigger and more specific than that. It's a reckoning and accounting for the holding back itself. Because here's what he now understands and what he needs to communicate. He owes you not just the feeling, but the acknowledgement of the wall. The specific message trying to come through has two parts. Part one is the Knight of Cups, devotion, the thing behind the wall. But part two, the part that makes it a judgment and not just a confession of feelings, is this. I know I held back. I know you could feel it. I know it was confusing and maybe hurtful, and it was never about you, it was my fear. And I'm sorry I made you feel the distance of it. That second part is everything. Because a lot of men, when the wall finally breaks, come rushing in with the feeling and completely skip the accounting for the years of restraint, and that leaves you holding all the confusion and hurt of the holding back, with no acknowledgement of it. Judgment is asking him to do the harder, fuller thing, to not just offer the feeling now, but to own the withholding then. And whether he can do that, whether he can name the wall, take responsibility for the distance it created, and apologize for it without you having to drag it out of him, is one of the truest tests of whether his transformation is real. Here's the practical distinction, and hold on to it. There's a big difference between a man who says, I have feelings for you, and a man who says, I've had feelings for you for a long time. I held them back out of my own fear. I see now how that must have felt from your side, and I'm sorry. The first is a confession. The second is a reckoning. It includes you. It includes your experience. It takes responsibility. The first asks you to be happy about his feelings. The second respects what his holding back cost you. Judgment says the real message includes the reckoning. Listen for whether his does. And I want to be really practical about why this distinction is your single best diagnostic tool, because it cuts straight to the heart of whether he's actually grown. A man who comes to you with only the feeling I like you, I've always liked you, let's be together and skips the accounting, is, whether he means to or not, asking you to absorb all the cost of his holding back for free. He gets to enjoy the relief of finally opening up, while you're left quietly carrying every confusing, hurtful, self-doubting moment his wall put you through, with no acknowledgement that it even happened. And a man who can't acknowledge the wall probably hasn't actually understood it, which means he's at real risk of building another one the next time he gets scared. But a man who can look at you and name it, I know what I did, I know how it landed on you, and I'm sorry, has done the internal work of actually seeing his pattern. And a man who can see his pattern is a man who has a fighting chance of not repeating it. So the reckoning isn't about making him grovel. It's your evidence. It tells you whether he merely had a feeling break loose, or whether he genuinely grew a new capacity for self-awareness. One of those is safe to build with. The other is a lovely burst that may well brick itself back up the moment life gets scary again. Listen for the reckoning. It's the tell. Next card. The final card where this leaves you okay. Last card. After the wall, the fear, the ending that broke it, the devotion behind it, the old wound underneath, the dam breaking, and the reckoning he owes you, where does this leave you? The card is the Ace of Pentacles. And I love this as the closer, because the Ace of Pentacles is the most grounded, real, tangible card of new beginnings in the entire deck. It's not the fantasy of a fresh start, it's the seed of a real one. A solid offering, something with actual substance and roots, not just sparkle. And its landing here tells me that what's being offered to you now, on the other side of all that holding back, has the potential to be real grounded, lasting, buildable, rather than just a dramatic emotional burst that fizzles. But, and this is the Ace of Pentacles' whole nature, it's a seed, which means it's an offer, not a guarantee. A seed only becomes something if it's planted in good soil and tended consistently over time. So what you're being handed is potential genuine, grounded potential that now has to be proven through the slow, unglamorous work of consistency. The Ace of Pentacles doesn't say, and they lived happily ever after. It says here is something with real roots available to you now, and whether it grows depends on what gets done with it, by both of you, over time. So here's where this leaves you. You're being offered a seed by a man who spent a long time unable to offer you anything at all. That's genuinely beautiful, and it's worth honoring. But you're encouraged to treat it like what it is, a beginning that has to earn its future. You don't have to fall on it gratefully like it's the last water in the desert. You get to receive it with an open hand and clear eyes, plant it if you choose to, and then watch, without rushing, whether he tends it. Whether the Eight of Wands burst becomes an Ace of Pentacles harvest. Whether the man who finally opened up can stay open when the crisis-fueled urgency fades and only ordinary, daily devotion is left. That's the real question, and it's yours to answer on your own timeline. He's finally offering the seed. What grows from it is a story that hasn't been written yet, and you hold at least half the pen. And here's the last thing I want to give you about the Ace of Pentacles, because it's the quiet gift hiding inside this card, and I don't want you to miss it. The Ace of Pentacles isn't only about what he's offering you. It's about what's newly available to you, full stop, and that includes possibilities that have nothing to do with him at all. Because here's a truth I'd be failing you not to say. The seed of a grounded new beginning is being placed in your hand. And while it may be this man, the deeper message is that you have arrived at a season of real, buildable new beginnings. Period. Your life. Your capacity to plant something solid and tend it into a harvest. So even as he comes down off his wall and offers you his devotion, I want you holding the Ace of Pentacles as a message about your own fertile ground, that you are at a genuine starting point, that real things can take root for you now, and that you get to be selective about what you plant, because the soil is good and the season is yours. Don't plant the first seed handed to you just because it arrived with a dramatic story attached. Plant what you actually want to grow. That's the Ace of Pentacles' real gift. Not here is your man, but here is your fertile season. Choose your seeds with care. And a woman choosing her seeds with care, from a place of abundance rather than scarcity, is one of the most powerful things in the entire deck. Comment my fertile season if you're ready to receive this as a message about your new beginning, not just his. Before I bring this all together, I want to pause on something. Because there's a question hiding in this whole reading that I think you deserve a real answer to. And the question is, why did it take something so drastic? Why an ending, a death card, a whole chapter of his life collapsing? Why did it take all that? Why couldn't he just choose you earlier with less drama? And the answer is one of the truest things I know about human beings. So let me give it to you straight. People do not change when the pain of staying the same is bearable. They change when it becomes unbearable. That's it. That's the whole mechanism. For all those months or years, holding back was painful for him, but it was bearable. It hurt, but he could live with it. And as long as a situation is merely painful but bearable, people will stay in it more or less forever. Because change is frightening, and the familiar pain is at least known. The devil you know. He knew the ache of holding back. He didn't know what would happen if he stopped. So he stayed in the known ache. What an ending does, what the death card does, is it makes the known ache suddenly unbearable. It raises the cost of staying the same past the point a person can tolerate. When his later died, the holding back stopped being a bearable ache and became an active emergency, because now he could feel time running out. And the pain of possibly losing you forever finally outweighed the pain of risking rejection. That's the tipping point. That's why it took something big. The wall didn't come down because he suddenly got braver. It came down because the event made not acting more painful than acting. His courage didn't grow. His fear of the alternative did. And here's why I'm telling you this. Because it's practical and it matters for how you read what comes next. Change that happens this way through an unbearable cost tipping point is real, but it needs to be consolidated to last. In the immediate aftermath of a death event, he's flooded with urgency and clarity. But urgency fades. The funeral ends, the crisis passes, the sharp awareness of mortality dulls, and life creeps back toward normal. And when it does, some people slide right back behind the wall. Because the thing that made them brave was circumstantial, not internal. So the question you'll get to watch play out is whether he uses this window, this rare, cracked open, honest window, to build something durable before the urgency fades. Whether he converts a moment of forced clarity into a lasting choice. That's the difference between a man who was shocked into a temporary opening and a man who was genuinely, permanently changed. And only time and consistency will show you which one he is. Let me gather it all up for you. The Four of Pentacles showed us the holding back, not distance, but presence with the brakes on. A man white-knuckling a feeling too big to trust himself with. The Nine of Swords revealed why. The 3M mind, the private torment. The fear disguised as wisdom that talked him out of you over and over in the dark. The Death card was the specific event the title promised an ending, a chapter closing. Something that shattered his illusion of infinite time and made holding back suddenly more dangerous than risking. The Knight of Cups named what was actually behind the wall. Not mere attraction, but devotion the terrifying. All in kind that people guard most fiercely. The Five of Cups exposed the deepest root. An old wound, a past heartbreak. A spilled cup that made him flinch at you like a bitten child flinches at a gentle dog. Proof his wall was built of old bricks, not anything you did. The Eight of Wands showed what changes now. The dam breaking, the sudden fast unstuck movement. The burst of a man who couldn't say the thing for years, suddenly unable to hold it in. Judgment told us the real message: he owes you not just the feeling, but the reckoning, the ownership of the wall and what its distance cost you. And the Ace of Pentacles left you with a grounded seed, real, buildable potential that now has to prove itself through consistency over time. So here's what I want you to carry out of this, my loves. Somebody has been holding back an enormous thing from you, not because you weren't worth it, but because you were worth so much that the wanting terrified him. And then, exactly like my Uncle Danny in that funeral parking lot, something ended in his world and made him realize the terrifying truth. That holding back was never the safe option. That you can guard a feeling so carefully for so long that you run clean out of time to ever feel it out loud. Something made him see that, and the wall came down. Now, I'm not going to tell you what to do with a man who finally lowered his wall. That's yours to decide. And you should decide it slowly and clearly, watching what he does and not just what the dam break makes him say. But I want you to hold two things at once. Hold compassion, because holding back that severe comes from real pain, and the fact that he's opening up at all is a genuine act of courage for him. And hold discernment, because his courage doesn't obligate your yes, and a seed is not a harvest. And the only proof of real change is consistency after the urgency fades. Compassion and discernment, both hands. That's how you meet a man coming down off a wall. And whatever you decide, know this. The version of you that he finally couldn't hold back from is not a version you performed or earned by waiting. It's just you. You were always the dream he was afraid to say out loud. He just finally, at long last, got scared of the right thing of losing you instead of losing face. And that's the whole reading. If this hit you, if you know exactly which wall this is, exactly who's been holding back, exactly what ended in their world like this video, it truly helps these specific messages reach the women they're meant for. And subscribe to Elena Tarot, because grounded, honest readings like this one are what I'm here to do. Tell me in the comments which card cracked it open for you. The Triumphier? The ending that changed everything? The devotion behind the wall? I read every one. And if you already know exactly who this masculine is, you don't have to name him. Just leave a single so I know the wall came down. Thank you for being here today. And thank you for being the kind of person worth an 11-year secret, the kind of dream a person guards so carefully they can barely say it out loud. Don't ever mistake someone's holding back for your smallness. Usually, it's the exact opposite. I'll see you in the next one.